Institute. Please say hello to Rebecca, or I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
Hi everybody, I'm Rebecca.
They've brought some really good information, some good resources, and some cool and cute swag with them. So after this part of the program concludes, please make sure you visit their booth. We also have an outdoor component to today's program. My colleagues from Sacramento Fire have brought their safety trailer out for you to play with, essentially. It's the same trailer that they'll bring to outreach events, and it's going to reinforce a lot of what we talk about today. Okay. My name is Simone Nizal. I am the public education specialist at Cosumnes Fire Department. And before I begin, I just want to thank, again, my colleagues at Sacramento Fire and Firefighters Burn Institute for coming out today and making today possible. This was a collaboration. Also want to thank ACC Senior Services for hosting us. And we're really glad that we can talk to you today about cooking safety in advance of Fire Prevention Week, which starts on October 6th. Okay. All right, let's dive in. So our objectives today are pretty simple. To recognize the dangers of distraction when cooking, to determine some hazards in the kitchen, and to describe strategies for staying safe while cooking. I also want you to be able to, when you leave today, to identify safety tools around the home and how to use them, right? A lot of what we talk about today is common sense, but I don't know if you can relate. Common sense is not so common anymore, right? And so it's always good to be reminded of how to be safe in the spaces where we spend the most time, which our homes are one of those spaces. Okay, this is our agenda. We'll move through this. We'll start by looking at some statistics about home fires and older adults. Talk about cooking safety tips, and I am going to teach you a little bit about the classes of fire, which is a fancy way of saying the types of fire that we come into contact with. We'll look at fire extinguishers, some burn safety tips, and then we'll end with a quick plug for Fire Prevention Week, which again starts on October 6th. All right, so you didn't know that I was going to start with a chemistry lesson, but I do want to ground our discussion with a definition of what fire is. A lot of people hear the word fire, they immediately think it's the flames, right? Well, that's part of it. The flames are really the visible part of this chain reaction that we see between oxygen, heat, and fuel. Okay, when I go to elementary schools, what I do with our students is ask them to make a triangle with their hand like this, and we talk about the fire triangle. You guys are adults, so I'm going to use a different word, a little bit more sophisticated vocabulary here. This is the fire tetrahedron, which is basically a three-dimensional object, right? That shows you that oxygen, heat, fuel, those all come together to create the chain reaction that is fire. And so firefighting is really about taking out one of these pieces of the fire tetrahedron and being strategic about how we do that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about home fires. Now, this is particularly important for our audience today. Your risk of dying in a home fire actually gets larger as you get older, okay? Older adults compared to the general population, according to the NFPA, 65 to 74-year-olds had about a 2.2 times a greater risk of dying in a fire than any other demographic group. Those who were ages 75 to 84 had a 3.1 time greater risk of dying in a fire. And so this is something that we want to keep in mind as we age, that our risk goes up. That doesn't mean that we are guaranteed to die in a home fire. A risk is just something we pay attention to and we start to plan around, right? But these are important statistics that are founded on research from a credible source and that we want to pay attention to. All right, a few more numbers for you. During 2017 to 2021, research showed us that the #1 cause of home fires still remains cooking fires. Okay? And the #1 cause of home fire injuries, which are most often burns, are related to those home fires. Okay? The second leading cause, cooking fires are the second leading cause of home fire deaths. Okay? So a structure fire is obviously a major hazard in the home. And what we know from the research is that home fire deaths are often the result of a cooking fire. Second leading cause. Some other things to pay attention to. 44% of all reported home fires in the US were related to incidents that happened as a result of cooking. Okay? And 18% of all home fire deaths each year are related to cooking. 42% of all reported home fire injuries related to cooking. So these are numbers we want to pay attention to. Not numbers that we want to be, or to cause us to panic, but help us to be informed about how we protect ourselves in our homes, which is where we spend the most time. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how to stay safe while we're cooking. Okay, one really important thing to do, and this again is common sense, but common sense isn't all that common anymore. And on top of it, we have a lot of distractions in our society. It's just part of the way we live now. We need to keep a close eye on whatever it is we're cooking. So the temptation for a lot of people is to put something on the stove and to step away for a second. And I'm just going to step away for a short period of time. I know it's there. I've cooked this meal 1,000 times. I don't need to watch it. Well, that is when we tend to see trouble, okay? In addition to leaving the source of your cooking, you might be physically present, but you might be distracted by something. So how many of you, just out of curiosity, have a cell phone? Let's do a quick straw poll. Yeah. Raise your hands. Yeah, okay, a lot of us in this room do. And sometimes we can get very absorbed in our cell phones, okay? Or other technological devices, and those can distract us from what we're doing, including cooking. Cooking, we need to pay attention, right? We're working with an active heat source. We do not want something to catch fire and to spread. One of the things that I learned when joining the fire service, which I never really had a good appreciation of, is that fire doubles in size every minute, right? So it gets bigger faster than we really can appreciate. So the NFPA, I believe it was the NFPA, came up with a good slogan back in the day: stand by your pan, for any Loretta Lynn fans in the audience, right? So always keep a close eye on what you're cooking. Another important thing is that we want to keep anything that can burn away from the cooking area. So any fuel source. You remember your fire tetrahedron, right? I showed that to you earlier. Quick quiz. Okay? We have to have what in order to create the chemical reaction that is fire? We have to have fuel. We have to have oxygen. And we have to have heat, right? Well, our heat source in the kitchen tends to be a stove, right? Fuel is really anything that can burn. That could be paper towels, that could be an oven mitt, right? You're like, but I use that to protect myself against burns. Well, it can, if it gets hot enough, it can burn and it can combust, right? So if your stove looks like this, we want to make it look like this, right? We want distance away from the stove for anything that can burn, okay? Makes sense? Unfortunately, I don't have a really cute slogan like the last one for this safety tip, but just remember, keep stuff off of your stove and away from your oven, especially when you're using it and it's hot, okay? All right, and this is another thing. We want to keep a lid nearby when we're cooking or when we're frying in particular, right? If we're frying something, we tend to be using grease, right? And a grease fire is something that we have to treat a little bit differently than other fires, right? Again, quick quiz, do we put water on a grease fire? No, okay, good job, we don't, right? Why do we need a pan nearby? Again, going back to your fire tetrahedron, what part are we attacking when we use the can? What are we taking away? Oxygen, you got it, exactly. We're smothering that fire, and we're taking away by taking away the oxygen source. And so typically, a lid will do that if a grease fire forms in a frying pan.
I sort of disagree with you. I remember at home, I had a fire on my stove. So I poured water on it, and that put the flame out, and I had no problem.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that you did not have any problems. It's possible that you might have been cooking. Were you cooking with oil, grease, fat?
Well, I was making candle, so I took the stuff and moved it. When I moved it, it hit the stove and started a fire.
Okay, so it sounds like the material that you were working with wasn't necessarily grease, right? We treat a grease fire differently. We treat a grease fire differently because the substance involved is an oil. And you've heard the old adage, oil and water don't mix, right? That's what we're concerned about when we warn against throwing water on a grease fire. And that's why it's good to have a pan nearby. Now, you're right that water works to put out fires. Why else would our firefighters run around in these engines that are full of water, right? Water is a great way to put out a fire. And again, what element of the tetrahedron does it address? Heat, right? Water takes down the heat in a fire. That's how we put it out. But in the kitchen, with cooking fires, we have to be careful, because not all fires are the same. And we're going to talk a little bit about that actually right now. Let me see here. Okay, so I want to introduce you to classes of fire, which is another way of saying types of fire, right? There are more classes of fire than I have up here today, but I want to talk to you about the main ones that we're going to encounter in the home. A, B, and C, right? It's easy as A, B, and C. A is ordinary combustibles. So combustibles is a fancy word for saying something that can burn. So we're talking about paper, we're talking about wood, we're even talking about plastic, right? Okay. B fires, or class B fires, flammable liquids and glasses, okay? And class C refers to live electrical equipment. Now, when we're cooking, we're dealing with live electrical equipment oftentimes. A stove is something that we energize by plugging into the wall, and we need to be mindful that the appliances in our home are powered by electricity when we go to fight a potential fire. Now, the good news is that a lot of, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that every home should have a fire extinguisher, right? And if you live in a community, then there's definitely a fire extinguisher that should be posted, should be labeled clearly, right? Do you know where the fire extinguishers are in this building? No? Okay, I challenge you after this presentation, as you're walking around, to identify where you see fire extinguishers. And many of the ones that we use in our home, the ones that we can go to Home Depot or Lowe's to purchase, are called ABC fire extinguishers. And why do you think we call them ABC fire extinguishers? Well, it's because they handle all 3 of these types of fires. So if, for instance, you were in a situation where something in your kitchen caught fire, right? And you didn't have a pan lid nearby, but you did have your handy dandy fire extinguisher. Well, guess what? This would be safe to use on it, right? Because the agent inside can deal with these different types of fires. Does that make sense? Okay, yes?
I saw one at Costco that says kitchen extinguisher. Now, can you talk about that a little bit?
Was it a class K?
I don't know.
Okay, kitchen fire extinguisher, I would be curious to know, did it have ABC marked on it? The one that you saw in Costco? Oh, okay. If the one you saw at Costco, even if it was labeled a kitchen fire extinguisher, what I would be paying attention to is what types of fire, classes of fire does it address? If it's an ABC combination fire extinguisher like this one, then yes, you can use it in the kitchen, but you could also use it in other places in your house too.
Is it as good?
Is it as good?
Smaller, but you know.
Yeah, so the thing that I will say, I get this question a lot in the community, oh, are these fire blankets good, or is this type of fire extinguisher good? I can't endorse any particular brand or product, but what I can say is that what you want to look for to make sure that your firefighting equipment is good is that it's been tested. And so there is something called, let me write this down actually. There's something called Underwriters Laboratories, right? And they do intensive testing of firefighting equipment. And they have a little seal that has a U and an L in it. That's what I look for to make sure that a product is legitimate. Okay, Underwriters Laboratories. Does that make sense? Yes?
I saw on TV where a fireman have a blanket that put over the fire.
Yes.
Is that a special blanket?
Yes, so there are fire blankets on the market now, and I get this question quite a bit. Again, I can't endorse a specific product, but what I always like to tell people when they ask, oh, well, should I get a fire blanket or should I use a fire extinguisher? The most important thing is that you're getting a product that's been tested, right? We can buy things now from anywhere. You can get things off of Amazon that have not been tested, right? But that still call themselves, you know, firefighting equipment. We want to make sure that whatever we purchase and invest in to protect ourselves in our home has been tested. So again, look for that Underwriters Laboratory seal. Okay, great questions. We're gonna move on just for the sake of time. So let me X out of here. We'll go to the next slide. And I just want to introduce you to how to use a fire extinguisher. Now, I can't go into great detail about this, but this is a topic that we touched upon the last time we visited and that some people expressed curiosity about. People know about fire extinguishers, but a lot of people have told me, I've never handled one. I don't know what I would do if I actually encountered a fire and I had to use one. Well, we have this method called PASS, which you'll get to explore a little bit more when you go out and see Sacramento Fire's safety trailer. But essentially, if you have a fire extinguisher, the PASS method is pulling the pin, aiming at the base of the fire, squeezing the lever, and then sweeping from side to side. And I don't mean sweeping like sweeping dust. I mean sweeping like going back and forth, right? Why do you think we aim at the base of the fire instead of at the flames? Why do we go low? Where the fuel is? What else? It's the hottest part of the fire. Exactly. Does anybody like to roast marshmallows?
I do.
Are you okay? One of us likes to roast marshmallows. Well, oftentimes you'll hear people say, well, don't stick your marshmallow at the top in the flames. Position it toward the bottom so it will heat slowly. That's the hottest part, and it'll toast, right? You know, when I'll see kids sometimes on camping trips, They get really excited and they just want to stick their whole marshmallow right in the flames, right? And what happens? It burns to a crisp and it doesn't burn evenly, but you roast it down at the bottom. That's the hot part of the fire, and you roast it slowly and you get that nice toasty glow. So just remember, you want to aim at the base of the fire, and you're going to use a pass when you use your fire extinguisher. Okay, we're going to talk about burn safety really quickly. And this is pretty important actually, because more often than not, around cooking, I think we see a lot of burns to varying degrees, but there are small changes that you can make when you are preparing food in the kitchen that can keep yourself safe. And one of the easiest things to do is to turn pot handles toward the back of your stove. That's it, right? Common sense, easy peasy. But when we're distracted, when we're busy, when we need to feed family or ourselves and it's after a long day, it might not be something that we think about. And what happens if we have a pan handle sticking out and we walk by it? What could happen? Can knock it over on ourselves. How many of you have pets at home? One of us, all right. Okay, 2, 3 of us have some pets. Okay, pets don't necessarily think about where they're going, and they don't necessarily respect the fact that you're cooking next to energized and hot equipment, and so they might go under your legs. We don't want anyone to trip. We don't want any hot stuff to go on them. And that actually leads to a really important tip for both pets and kids. Okay, we want to try to keep them as best as possible, as much as possible, especially kids with whom we can teach this. We want to keep them 3 feet away from cooking equipment to prevent those burns, right? When I go out to schools, I'll have the students take 3 big steps with me away from a picture of a stove. That's one way to do it. But just remind them, hey, if you're close to this equipment, you could get burned. And so the best way to protect yourself is to step away, right? And this includes not only stoves, but also grills, barbecues, cooking equipment outside. Okay, the last tip that I want to share with you has to do with clothing, okay? So a lot of burns related to cooking happen because people may not be paying attention to what they're wearing or how what they're wearing could become a hazard when they're cooking. Now, a beautiful flowy shirt is fuel for a fire, potentially. If it heats up to a certain point, it can ignite, and we don't want that to happen. So when we're cooking, we recommend that you wear tight-fitting clothing, right? Rather than loose and flowing stuff, and that might include, for example, like a robe, right? You might not think of a robe as being a hazard when you're cooking, but it can become one, right? So you see the difference between these 2 pictures. We want that tight, close-fitting clothing or sleeves rolled up, okay, so that nothing that we're wearing can become fuel and can ignite. All right. Now, I want to highlight the fact that we have representatives from the Firefighters Burn Institute here today. Again, they're in the back. They've got a table and they've got goodies. Please stop by and talk with them so they can give you more information about burn awareness, burn safety, okay? I also want to highlight Fire Prevention Week. We talked to you today about cooking safety. A lot of you, I think, are old enough to know, like, that so this stuff is common sense, but common sense isn't that common anymore. The calls that we get, right? Things that you would think that someone would know. So we hope that you'll share this information with family, with friends, with neighbors. And I would be remiss if I didn't make a plug for smoke alarms, because this year's Fire Prevention Week theme is smoke alarms, make them work for you. And the last time that we came out and visited ACC Social Hour, we did talk to you about smoke alarm safety, so I won't belabor this, but I want to remind you that we want to have working smoke alarms in every sleeping area in the house and just outside every sleeping area in the house and on every floor, okay? If possible, it's always great to have them interconnected, so if one sounds, all of them sounds. But if not, even these wall-mounted units, like the one I have in my hand here, they are pretty loud, and they get the job done. We want them in our sleeping areas. And why do you think we want them in our sleeping areas? Why do we tell people put a smoke alarm in your bedroom? It'll wake you up. When are we most vulnerable? Right? When we're asleep, right? So if hearing is an issue at all, there is lots of technology the smoke alarm technology has advanced in years, and there are different types of smoke alarms that can awaken you in the event of an emergency, some with bed shaker elements, some with strobing lights. But at the bottom line is we want you to be safe when you're sleeping, when you're most vulnerable, and so you want to have a smoke alarm in the bedroom and just outside of your bedroom. And Cosumnes Fire happens to offer a smoke alarm check program for our residents. We serve City of Elk Grove and City of Galt. And especially for our senior citizens, for anybody who's like, I cannot get up on a ladder and change out those batteries, the backup battery, or I cannot get up on a ladder and change out my smoke alarm once it's 10 years old and has expired. We provide that service. You can visit our website, cosumnescsd.gov/fire. But keep in mind that we have a couple of fire districts represented today. And I believe ACC is in Sacramento Fire's jurisdiction. Cosumnes Fire is just outside of it. So we do serve residents Cosumnes Fire serves residents in City of Elk Grove and City of Galt. And one last plug, we have Giant Pumpkin Festival coming up this weekend. If you want to learn any more about fire safety, cooking safety, please be sure to visit the Cosumnes Fire Department's booth at Giant Pumpkin Festival. There's a lot of other fun stuff to do there as well. It's not only about pumpkins, it's about everything. It's about community. So we hope to see you there. And with that, I want to just open it up really briefly for one or two questions before we move on to the interactive part of our program. Yes, ma'am.
How do you get rid of old extinguishers?
Old extinguishers. That's an excellent question. So old extinguishers there are some places where you can recycle them. You cannot take them to your fire department to recycle them. That's a question that I get quite a bit. But I did hear this from my boss, the deputy fire marshal, that if that's not an option, the fire extinguishers that you buy at your Costco or your Home Depot, you can actually dispose of in the trash once they've been used. Yes. The ABC combination, the smaller ones. That's what he told me. Now, I would prefer if we recycled them, but that might take a little bit more research to find a place that collects them. So keep that in mind when you purchase your fire extinguisher. The ones that you are going to observe as you're walking around the building today, the ones that are mounted on the walls of ACC, those are serviced by particular companies, right? And so those are ones that can be recharged, meaning they can be refilled. The ones that you get at your Costco, your Home Depot, those cannot be refilled, right? They are one and done. Okay. Other questions?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Where can you buy these blankets which is fire prevention?
The fire blankets that we were talking about earlier, they can be purchased now from most major retailers. And they can also be purchased online. Again, though, the important thing is to ensure that they are coming from a reputable company and they've been tested. Okay, great. Did you have a follow-up? Yeah.
Is there anything you can tell me about induction cooking that's particularly vulnerable for fire?
Induction cooking?
You know, the induction.
Electric induction. What I will say about that is in the research that I've done, what was interesting is that electric stoves are more involved in cooking fires than gas ranges. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense given the fact that with a gas range, you are looking at an open flame. So you know something's on fire, right? Versus an electric range, you may not appreciate the fact that that thing is so hot and you might think, I can walk away for a minute, right? So there is some discrepancy between the number of cooking fires associated with gas ranges and with electric ranges. And I would just warn, you want to stand by your pan, you want to pay attention, particular attention to your electric stove, because more people, I think, tend to walk away because they don't see an open flame and it doesn't trigger in their brain, that's fire, that's hot, right?
But that's what the building codes are pushing to go all electric, right? They're pushing away from the gas.
There is a push to go away from gas. I'm not 100% sure on what that looks like in terms of the rollout. But the most important thing is to be safe, regardless of whether or not you have gas or electric. You're watching your food. You're making sure that you're not leaving something that's hot alone. And especially if there are vulnerable individuals in your home. This could be children. This could be adults too, maybe with cognitive decline. We do not want to leave hot things running when they're not being supervised. Okay, does that answer your question?
Sort of.
Okay, we can talk more one-on-one about induction after the program, but I just want to thank you all for your time and attention. We're going to transition now, and I encourage you to visit the Firefighters Burn Institute booth at the back of the studio today, and then make your way out to the front of ACC to check out Sacramento Fire's cooking safety trailer. They've got some interactive stuff so you can kind of play a little bit, which we like to play in the fire service. We do. We like to have a good time. We're all about safety, but we also want people to learn in fun and interactive ways. And so take advantage of the fact that there is this amazing trailer just outside. All right. Thank you again, and look forward to seeing you in the future.